cat that disappears from home turns up 3 years later, looking completely different. There's a reason people say that cats have 9 lives. They're resilient. While you'd think domesticated animals are dependent on their human owners, cats are feral at heart and can fend for themselves upon being separated from their cushy indoor existences. But when one particular curious kitty ran away from his home in Cornwall, England in 2011, his owners were distraught. They thought they'd never see him again. That made it all the more surprising when he turned up 3 years later, and his, different appearance made him hard to recognize. What had he been doing all this time? Gover, Cornwall residents Helen and Philip Johns adored their black tomcat, Woozy, with everything they had. Since their pet was an indoor-outdoor cat, he'd come and go as he pleased. There was a mutual trust between him and his owners. In 2011, he went out one morning, as cats do, and we never saw him again, Helen said. Eventually, the Joneses felt they had to move on from their cherished Woozy, even getting another cat, Lola, to fill the gap in their lives. Tragically, Helen and Philip thought the worst, imagining their sweet Woozy starving to death on the streets or getting hit by a car. Because he didn't come prancing home ready for his fancy feast, they just figured Woozy had died. Boy, were they in for a surprise. See, Woozy, a skillful traveler if you will, was thriving out in the world, as he somehow landed himself in the town of Callington, 30 miles from his home. After the adventurous kitty traversed 30 miles on its own, he declared Ginster's pastry factory his resting spot, perhaps smelling all the savory treats inside. He lurked around the outside of the building long enough for employees to eventually discover him. The Ginster's factory employees, delighted to have Woozy around, unofficially adopted him and renamed him George. And yes, they fed George plenty of treats not meant for 4-legged furry friends. It was as if Woozy had finally reached the promised land. Considering Ginster's is known for its Cornish pasty, workers fed him pastries and sandwiches practically whenever he wanted and let him roam the offices freely. Though Woozy was brought back outside at closing time, he was always patiently waiting by the door for the Ginster's crew the next morning. This was their routine, and since the little tomcat was treated like the king of cats, it was a routine he quickly got used to. This was Woozy's life for a while. For 3 years, actually. It was a good long run at Ginster's, but in the beginning of 2014, the workers decided to turn Woozy into local veterinarians. Thankfully, Woozy had an identification microchip embedded in his skin. With one quick scan, the vets knew Woozy belonged to Helen and Philip Johns. They soon got a call they never thought they'd receive in a million years. Nearly 3 years on, we get a call from the vet saying, "We've got your cat here." I looked at our other cat, Lola, and told them they must be mistaken, Helen said. She didn't even consider the possibility that Woozy was still alive. It seemed too unlikely. Then it suddenly registered they must mean Woozy. I was so shocked, Helen continued. I was gobsmacked. We never expected to see him again, not after he'd been missing for 3 years. Though the Joneses were shocked then, they had no idea their missing tomcat would look so different. Considering the busy factory employees never kept track of how much Woozy ate, he got pretty plump in those 3 years away from home. A regular diet of chicken and bacon puff pasties will inevitably result in a fat cat paunch. He's a heavy cat now. He's quite large. We think that he may have been eating all the pasties and sandwiches up there, Helen explained. He's probably been given lots of tidbits from staff there. Though Helen and Philip were ecstatic to bring Woozy back home in Gover, they were a bit concerned about how he and Lola would interact. Other than the occasional odd hiss he'd direct at Lola, Woozy settled right into his old abode. He came home on Tuesday evening, came straight into the house, and just stretched out in the chair as if nothing had happened. He's like Lord Muck. It's surreal. He's unfazed by it, Helen disclosed, clearly stunned. But there was one mystery the family still needed to solve. We think he may have climbed into the back of a lorry delivering to the co-op store and gone unnoticed by the driver, Helen said of how Woozy possibly got to Callington. Of course, they couldn't be sure. Or he could have jumped into someone's car who was visiting the area when they opened the door. We just don't know. It's just a miracle he's here after 3 years, she continued. Helen and Philip understandably wanted Woozy to settle in for a few weeks before letting him explore the outdoors again. When Ginster's higher-ups heard about the heartwarming tale, a spokesperson issued a statement about company safety and hygiene. As you would expect from a food manufacturer, we have strict procedures to ensure that stray animals do not venture into the perimeter of our premises at any time. Cats are curious explorers by nature, so Woozy's little 3-year vacation isn't really unheard of. Other pet owners, too, have reunited with their adventurous felines years after they escaped. Please share this with your friends.